Hi, folks, and welcome back to.
Hey, folks, and welcome back to Soaring Prophets.
Oh, you lost. Oh, isn't that brilliant?
There you
Hey,
go.
hey, folks, welcome back to Soaring Prophets, live on location. Having some technical difficulties this evening, but thanks for sticking with us. Tonight, folks, we have a fantastic guest that's joined us, Jason Campbell, the son, the offspring of his famous father, who's been on a few times previous. And we've got Jason here tonight. First of all, thank you guys for joining in and checking us out. Like I said when this first started, we are having some technical difficulties, and we're going to try to work through these. If I lose some sound at times, I apologize, and we will get working on that. Jason, thank you for joining us. Jason's got a very interesting background. He has had many years in the racing community, the auto racing community. Formula One in the business side of things, in the marketing, advertising. Was down in the United States for a number of years, growing and developing that, and is now since really advocating for what's coming up in the marketing business in the race industry with some of the Netflix documentaries and series that are right there as well. So it's a pleasure to have you, Jason. Jason, thank you for joining us. And Jason, what's new with you guys?
Thanks, Patrick. Great to be here. And I just had to correct you a little bit. I was actually, for most of my career in Europe, I was there in England for 20 years before coming back to Canada back in 2014. But right now, it's back in full steam ahead planning for the AutoShow. We have had 2 years that we haven't been able to run. We tried to do a digital version in 2021. We tried to do a live event again for 2022. But COVID kept rearing its ugly head, and so this year we're back. It's full steam ahead. We've got a good slate of manufacturers, got a lot of cars, and so it's busy time. I mean, we're here. It's 9 o'clock. This is kind of early still. This time of year, it's every day is like a week, and every week is like a month in terms of putting things together. There's a lot to do, and the show's just in 3 months' time. So that's what's keeping me busy right now.
No
So what
doubt.
is the International Auto Show? What does it entail for people who don't know what an auto show is?
Well, this is actually going to be our 50th anniversary year for the Canadian International Auto Show. So it's an important year for us, not only a comeback from COVID interruption, but it's a big celebration. And this has always been not only a great show to see and educate yourself, what's new in the marketplace, see the latest developments. It's a big media opportunity for manufacturers to get in front of the press, get in front of what's now the press. The most important press is the social media.
Right.
We have over 340,000 people coming through the Metro Toronto Convention Center over a 10-day period. It's the largest consumer show in the country, and manufacturers invest very heavily in this show. So it's a great chance to put your best foot forward, and it really drives the spring selling season. The typical spring selling season is the busiest time of the year for manufacturers and dealers selling cars into the marketplace. And so for us to go in February when it's cold and windy and snowy outside and there's not that much else to do, it's a great opportunity to get in front of everybody and give families a chance to get out and have a bit of fun as well. It's not just a shopping experience. It's to see and dream and see all of the amazing cars that you'd never be able to chance to buy yourself. But we have over $100 million worth of specialty vehicles that come to the show, non-mainstream products. And that's really what drives a lot of the people that come through the door, because they want to just see and dream.
Yeah.
So Jason, that brings me to my first section of questions: is how did you get into the automotive sector yourself? I think every kid has scribbled a doodle on the back, come up with their own idea of what they thought was the greatest car. I think it's been most dudes' dream jobs to end up doing the industry that you now call home. What sparked that for you?
Well, it ran in our family, and my father's brother had a big PR agency in Detroit, and he wanted me to come work for him out of university. I graduated university in 1993, and I couldn't get a green card to work in the U.S. His agency managed a lot of the PR for the Ford Motor Company for all their racing activities in the United States, NASCAR, IndyCar, drag racing. And he owned a portion of a company in the UK. And because I couldn't get a green card, he said, look, let's go to Europe for a year, work there, then I can get you experience and bring you back to Detroit. But 1 year turned into 2. I didn't want to go back to Detroit. I loved living in England. And then after a couple of years in England, I got a chance to move into Formula One. And who wouldn't want to work in Formula One? I was a racing fan, followed the races when Senna was driving and Schumacher was racing and winning championships. And, for me, it was like a dream to be able to work, travel the world, and see all this stuff as a young man. I was, I think, 25 when I worked in Formula One for the first year. And, at that time, we were doing 16 Grand Prix a year, and I was going to every race and managing a lot of the executive travel, the transport, the hotels, the garage tours, that sort of thing. So it was a fantastic life. Didn't make much money at the time, but it was fun, and it was a really great experience, and I met a lot of really interesting people. And so that just kind of continued. So what was supposed to be 1 year turned in the end to be about 20 years living in the UK before I finally said, enough travel. That's enough. My wife was either you can stay married to me or married to your job. And so we decided to come back to Canada and do something that's just a little closer to home and got some more family time. And that's how I ended up back here.
Yeah, unfortunately, in those situations, when you get that 50% of your family walking out the door and 50% of your net income, you start making different decisions, right? That's a good way to look at that. Well, so Jason, obviously you have that as a background. You went to university at Brock University, I understand, took this job opportunity with a family member, went to Europe, and now the International Auto Show. How do we come to where we are now?
Well, through working in F1, I ended up meeting some of the folks here in Canada. Several of the dealers that were on the association that I'm currently working for were Formula One attendees. They'd been to several of the races. I was at the time working when I met them with the Renault Formula One team, and Renault as a sister company in Nissan. So we would do some joint promotions with Nissan here in Canada, bringing them to the guests of the Canadian Grand Prix. And I got to meet some of these dealer folks and people that I've got to know. And being a Canadian, there was a natural linkage there, and we stayed in touch. And I think it was for 7 years I ended up working with them. And when they'd come to Europe for races, I would host them at Renault's team suite, or I ended up working with Red Bull Racing for my final 3 years working in Europe. And so they wanted to be joining the winners, so we'd have them to the Renault, the Red Bull suite. And so we just naturally knew each other. And then when the opportunity came to replace the long-standing previous gentleman who was running the auto show here, Tom Tonks, he'd been running the show for over 30 years and retired. And so they did an international hunt looking for somebody with some international experience to come in. And, although I hadn't run auto shows before, I'd run major events and had attended many, many auto shows working with the car manufacturers over the years. And so I was very familiar with not only the Toronto show, but, other international shows like Geneva and Paris and Frankfurt. And so those kind of skill sets just came together. And luckily I was able to make it through the process. And, I've been really enjoying my time here in Canada, back and doing a little bit of international work. It still lets me get out and see some of the international events and the major shows around the world, so that we can learn what works and keep on top of what is the latest in the automotive industry, but still, have a base more in Canada and in one place, which is also quite nice. And it's been a fun run, and the show's a great show to take over. I mean, this is one of the premier automotive shows in not only North America but the world. It really is a very different take on how manufacturers are presented here, because we as a show really focus not just on the new mainstream automotive cars that are coming out, but we really have a very big focus on feature cars. So classic cars, exotic cars. We have a much bigger selection of 7 or 8 different features that we develop at the show each year, which really you don't find at any other major show around the world. And I'm including the likes of Paris or Frankfurt or LA or New York or any of the other major shows. They don't have anywhere near the investment that we do in our show here, which really makes it stand out as one of the best that's out there.
Amazing. So what is the big draw this year? Like you talked about, there's a lot of concept cars. Well, you didn't say concept cars, but you said a lot of like older cars that have been modified and stuff like that. Do you have a main headliner this year? Like the
Well, we are working on several potentials right now. This is something we hope to be able to solidify just before December. We normally do a big December ticket blitz, and that's our push to make that announcement just before the holiday season when tickets are in a big push in December. We have always had a major what we call the hero car. Last show in 2020, we had the Bugatti Voiture Noire, which was a one-of-a-kind $16 million car, which was our kind of headline car that year. We have had concept cars from Aston Martin. We've had Formula One teams do their launches here. We had a car from Dubai called the Devil 16. Really one-off unique vehicles that are really interesting, but they're part of a grouping. I mean, I think I mentioned earlier, we had over $100 million of specialty cars coming to the show in 2020, and those are cars that we bring in, we insure, because we know that the public really want to see them, whether it be a specialty Ferrari that's a $30 million Ferrari, or the most expensive car we actually had at the show in 2020 was a Corvette concept car from the 60s, and it was valued at over $35 million. So those are the kind of really, really unique things. But in a more accessible type of vehicle, really a lot of people are looking at what's new in the electric space, and that really is driving a lot of industry interest. Manufacturers are really pushing that side of it very heavily. Still in Ontario, we are still very, very small percentage of new car sales are fully electric, but that is definitely the way the industry is going. And it's something which a lot of just my friends and family that have mentioned, I'm coming back to the show. I want to come and see it. I want to learn more about what's new in the electric space. Check this out, because there are challenges with people in the marketplace trying to see these cars. Manufacturers have a hard time with the chip shortages, providing vehicles to the dealerships. And so where's the best place to see as many of these cars in one place all in one day is going to be at the AutoShow. And so that's where we think there's going to be a lot of interest from consumers heading to where we have a feature called Electric City, where they can learn a lot more about what's new in this electric space. What do they have to do to get ready to have an electric vehicle? Learn more about the range, and learn more about how you can have electric chargers installed in your home, whether it be a home or whether it be in a condo. Those kind of questions are a lot of the questions that a lot of people want to see. Likewise, they want to see some of the unique different things that are available in the electric space and micro-mobility vehicles. And we're going to have some interesting, unique micro-mobility vehicles that people can actually drive on the show floor this year at the show, which is going to be quite interesting for people. And so I think that's really going to drive a lot of interest. And the fact that, the show's been gone for, by the time we get in February, it's going to be 3 years. A lot of people make this an annual pilgrimage, or at least this every other year. And so I think we're going to see a big influx of people wanting to get back and see what's the latest and greatest in the space.
Right. Well, so Jason, you've brought up a number of different things there. First of all, how do you get a company to drop you off a $30 million car? And just that's an interesting conversation, to say the least. How does that negotiation come through? Obviously, they're vested in the process. They understand the amount of people that you folks have walking through your door. But to be able to, the boots on the ground, to be able to make that work, that's impressive.
It's a lot about relationships for those kind of specialty vehicles. I mean, we have a very close working relationship with one of our premier exhibit spaces in this show. One is Auto Exotica. We've got a great relationship with a specialty magazine called Auto Strata magazine, and they've got great personal relationships themselves with all the biggest collectors across not only Ontario but North America. And so we draw on those people to help convince some of their friends to allow us to look after the vehicles. We also have a very close relationship with Cobble Beach Concours d'Elegance. It's a show that's been running now for 8 years up just north of Owen Sound. Rob McLeese, who runs that, is a judge in many other North American shows, and he travels North America, almost, I'd say probably 8 or 9 weekends a year to be judging at some of these classic car shows like the Pebble Beach Concours, Amelia Island Concours, that sort of thing. And we have to rely on those folks who deal day to day with the people that own these amazing vehicles. And we have specialty carriers. We trust only our specialty carriers to these specialty vehicles. And if anyone has a particular, particular way they want their car transported, we'll do it. We'll take their transporter company. We have security overseeing this. We've got a great reputation of looking after people's vehicles, having done this for 50 years. And a lot of people know that if it's given to us, we'll look after it from the time we pick it up to the time it gets back to them, and their vehicle will be made right if there were to be any problems. But touch wood, we haven't had any major dramas in the 8 years that I've been here at the show. So long may that continue.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely. So you were talking about electric cars, and what do you think? Because you're kind of in the know of the marketing side of that. What do you think the major problem in Canada? Like you were saying that Canada doesn't have a lot of sales in full electric cars. Most of them are like hybrids of some kind. My friend just bought a hybrid Jeep. That's what most of my friends tend. The obstacle getting the electronic cars into Canada.
Well, I mean, currently, the biggest challenge is the shortage of chips, and that's a big challenge for all manufacturers. There isn't one manufacturer that's not affected by this, and some are affected worse than others. In Canada, we do actually have quite a strong uptake of full electric vehicles in Quebec and in British Columbia. In Ontario, it's not as far in advance. We don't have the same kind of incentive programs here in the province of Ontario that they do have in Quebec, because currently the prices for a full electric vehicle are generally higher than what you'll find for what we call an ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine vehicle. Over time, those prices will come and they'll meet in the middle. I think then as production ramps up, not just for Canada, but for the rest of the world as well, because it's not just Canada that has a future goal of having nothing but fully electric vehicles on sale by 2035. Much of Europe is in the same situation. Some countries are even taking a more aggressive stance. But one of the biggest challenges has been up to now, range anxiety, but most of the manufacturers now have come up with vehicles that really are really very easily address that range anxiety with, extended batteries that can take you 400, 500, 600 kilometers on a single charge. And for most people, that's plenty enough for what you need on a day-to-day experience. I think the bigger challenge in Canada is just our pure geography, is that, when you're going in and around the urban centers like Toronto or the, GTA area, you really don't find a problem with any vehicles being able to get you there and back even on the same day. It's the challenge is when you're doing multi-city hops across Northern Ontario or from here to Montreal, and finding charging stations that are available and working. Those are the big challenges. And, there is a recognition in the industry that this needs to be addressed. There needs to be many more times the number of electric charges before widespread consumer adoption can be, it's fine, for example, having one electric vehicle in your family if you've got two cars. In the end, by 2035, the rules are right now that you're not going to be able to buy anything but a fully electric vehicle. By then, though, I think that technology is going to improve, the range is going to be even better, and there will be a much greater expansion of the network. So that's certainly the biggest challenge that's holding things back in Canada right now is price and ability to have confidence as a consumer that wherever you go, you're going to be able to recharge your car in a reasonable amount of time and be safe in doing so.
Yeah, Saskatchewan is a heck of a province trying to get across in -40 if you can't get your car going. So, yeah, that's an interesting facet. You said a number of things there. The profiteers, those who kind of follow our channel here, we've talked a lot about the semiconductor issue over the last about year and a half. Well, here we are again. We come full circle into the automotive sector. Do you think over the next little while, companies in China, companies like NIO, for instance, do you think that they're going to have a larger role in North American manufacturing, or sorry, the North American sales side, as opposed to just the manufacturing side?
It's a huge challenge to break into North America. I'm not saying it's not possible, but
Right.
the number of dealers that you have to have in order to break in to this marketplace makes it very challenging. When I was working at Renault, we had there was Renault and Nissan, and so we were very much aware of some of the discussions and
Right.
some of the internal discussions where should Renault come back to North America, but it was always discounted because the cost of investment in the retail network here would be so huge to try to come into not just Canada, but Canada is a fraction of the size, but the United States in particular. And you have to be in the United States in order to have the economies of scale to justify the expense for homologating the vehicles and providing the levels of service that's required.
So Jason, has Tesla in and of itself there with relegating itself away from the sales model that was the old established way of doing things? Do you think that that's kind of broken the mold for maybe the next generation of sales in North America?
There are a number of other companies that are trying to follow what Tesla's done. And originally Tesla came into the market, just buy online. We don't need dealers.
Right.
We've seen the dealers now be established, though. They realize that they do need a place for consumers to come and pick the vehicle up and get them serviced when there's a recall and answer their questions. So they are actually almost not in the exact same franchise model that some of the other manufacturers are, but the franchise model has served this industry very well, for 100 years, and I'm sure is going to continue in that way. There's going to be a little bit of trying new things. Every manufacturer is trying to dip their toe in the water to try to emulate what Tesla has done to some degree. But they are also still building new showrooms. Maybe not the same scale or size of the showroom as what they used to be mandating all manufacturers to have or all dealers to have.
Right.
Some of the showrooms are micro facilities, which are either in shopping malls or rather than doing the service at the showroom, it's a smaller showroom footprint where they have maybe 3 vehicles on display, and then they send the vehicles off to be serviced. But that service is a key part of the ownership experience, and that's really where the traditional dealership model has worked so well and will continue to work so well in the future. Our show is run by the dealers of Ontario, so I would be extolling the virtue of that. So just to be open and fair, but we represent 1,100 new car dealers in Ontario, and our association is over 100 years old. And there's a reason it's 100 years old, because it works.
Right.
Yeah.
Now,
Sorry, Pat. I may be old school, but I agree 100%. If I'm going to spend above $40,000 on a car, I need to touch it, feel it, taste it, smell it. Like I've tried to look online, look at different cars, and it's nice to see them and you see all the pictures and all that stuff. But sitting in the car, driving the car, you don't know. Like, I'm a tall guy, so there's quite a few cars I can't drive because the way they situate the mirror or the way the blind spots are because I'm taller, or the feel of the car, the feel of the sound on the road, because all cars are made differently. So I totally agree. To not have a dealership, I think, would be a huge mistake. I get the draw to be able to pick your colors and everything and have it dropped off at your door. But I still think you're right. You need at least 1 or 2 cars somewhere where you can go to and you can touch it, feel it, taste it. Now that's what you're doing on a wide scale. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions together, but they're quick questions. Where will it be in Toronto? And what kind of experience would just the general person just looking around have? Is it something that there'll be a lot to touch? It's a family event. We should bring our kids and really enjoy it, or is it more like a dealer event where dealers are coming to look at what's coming up next? What's the feel of the show?
Well, it really, during the 10-day run, the show is really a family event. I mean, it's a great shopping experience, and people that are looking for new cars, which are about 70% of the people that are coming through the door, are in the market for a car in the next 12 months. I mean, these are what our consumer surveys tell us. But they're not only there to shop, and most of the folks have already done their detailed shortlisting of brands that they want to look at and particular models that they want to see. It used to be the average consumer would go to an average of 4 or 5 different showrooms before they made their final purchase decision. Now the average is like 1.2 showrooms for the average consumer, because they've already done the research. They know in many cases more about the vehicle that they want to buy than even the salesperson may know, because they've really done 20 hours of research on this particular vehicle that they want. But they still, as you say, want to get in, touch and feel, see what the steering wheel feels like, see how, the infotainment system works, see what the family feels like, what does your partner think about the vehicle? What do your kids think about, is there enough space in the back of the car to fit the golf clubs or the hockey equipment? And, that's why the show and our show has been so successful, because it really gives you a chance to get in all of the vehicles. I mean, all of the manufacturers there have to let people into the vehicles that are on display. And so you do your shopping, but in addition to the shopping for vehicles, not that you're buying it there on the day, and that's one of the things that people like about the auto show is they come and they don't have any kind of pressure, because there are no salespeople on the floor pushing for sales. It's really just a representation of the brands and what they're available, and the customer service representatives that are there are just knowledgeable about the product, but they're not trying to sell anybody. And so it's a really no pressure environment, and they can go and see that. The typical show consumer takes about 3 hours to go through the show, sometimes 3.5. And so they're going to see the new products. The convention center is where the show's been held since '84, and it will still be at the Metro Toronto Convention Center in both buildings. It's a large facility. There's about 800,000 square feet of space that we spread out, and we've got displays across 7 of the 8 levels of the building. So it's a big show, and there's, as I mentioned, 7 or 8 different features, from classic cars to exotic cars to hot rods to race cars. There'll be this very big feature on electric vehicles and the electric vehicle technologies that are new in the marketplace. And so there's a little bit of everything for everybody at the show, from young kids. One of the favorite features that we had the last several years, in 2019, we had a giant Lego Bugatti. Lego had a big partnership with us. They had this 2 million brick Technic Lego Bugatti that actually ran and drove at the show. That was a great feature. Families were coming in with their kids just to see that vehicle itself.
Totally.
The year before, we had Hot Wheels were celebrating their 50th anniversary, and so we had a giant Hot Wheels track where kids could play and build their own track, and you have 20 kids running around this great track. And so we've tried to really have a lot of this kind of lifestyle element present at the show that you don't find at many other shows, and you don't certainly get at the dealerships. So that's what makes the show special, and a great day out to come down to downtown Toronto, see what's new in the show, and then go see a movie, go see a Leaf game, go do some shopping. It's a great day out, and that's why it's been so successful over the years.
Oh, no, that sounds amazing. Like right now, I think people are just starving to get out, do something new, something fun, because they've been trapped with their kids for a very long time. And it sounds like this show is just perfect. So are you telling me, though, like you have a $300 million car, I can hop in it? Or is it just...
Well, we don't have those are pretty rare. You can't get in those vehicles. The most expensive cars at the show, you can't get in, but you can see them and get as close as you'll ever otherwise get. But for the vast majority of vehicles on the floor, you can get in, and my son runs around with his friends and hops in the back of all the cars and tells me what one I should be buying next. And other families have the exact same experience.
That's fantastic. So are there different levels of tickets? Like I've noted, some shows I've been to, there's like VIP levels where you get to talk to certain like race car drivers. Like I have no concept of it right now that in your relation to what you're doing, but are there those kind of experiences too? Or like
I mean, the general, we have a media day which takes place before the show opens to the public, and that's going to be the Thursday, the 16th of February. And so that's in the morning where media get a chance both traditional print media, TV, radio, as well as the social media come in and tell the world about how wonderful all the new stuff is out there, and they're the first to show it. And then that evening, Thursday evening, we have what's called VIP night, and we have tickets available. This is where the industry really gets together, where the dealers come in and buy the $250 to $300 ticket to come in and be, wined and dined. And we have a specialty dinner, which is a higher end event, which we normally do on the Wednesday evening, which is for our collectors. And that those collectors, last 2020, we had 220 people there for that. And we bring in specialty speakers. We had Mario Andretti here a few years ago. We had Craig Jackson, who runs the Barrett Jackson auction.
Absolutely.
He was here a couple of years ago. Christian von Koenigsegg, who runs the Koenigsegg supercar brand. He was here 4 years ago. And Ross Braun, who runs Formula One sporting activities, he was here at the 2020 show along with Johnny Rutherford. And we try to have new personalities coming in every year and showcasing them to the media and to some of our VIP guests. And where we can, we bring in celebrities as well during the show for the public. But the show does get busy, it's a busy on weekends, and we really have enough activity and action going on during the weekends to keep everybody fully engaged without the celebrities. But the celebrity vehicles are also ones that have always proved interesting as well. That attracts the attention of the consumers. And we had a car from Deadmau5. I think it was 2016 or 2017 thereabouts, and it was incredible. I'm not a big fan. Before my team came to me and said, "Oh, here's Deadmau5's car," I really couldn't even tell you who he was. But it was a big hit, and a younger demographic than myself knew everything about it. So.
Well, so Jason, I think that goes right to this next question, is that from a marketing perspective, a lot of the media out there right now with the Netflix documentaries, the movies, the cinematics that have been coming out into the automotive sector over the last couple of years, is it making it a more family friendly, a more individually driven show, as opposed to something maybe that was just car guys traditionally? Now you're getting individuals that, we saw the movie, we watched about Ford, now we want to come to the show and we want to sit inside and see what those vehicles are like. And we got a little bit more of an understanding of the engineering process that goes from a pile of steel to where we are today.
Well, the biggest, I think, story about Netflix and cars has been the Drive to Survive series in Formula One. Formula One's always been a very closed, elitist sport. I mean, for many, many years, they really restricted access to the Formula One paddock. Bernie Ecclestone, who was running the sport for many years, really wasn't as old school as you get in terms of, he was not a believer in social media. The drivers couldn't put any social media postings out from the F1 paddock. When Bernie sold Formula One to Liberty Media, Liberty have a totally different view on that and really embraced social media. And we've seen them take the gamble of going and commissioning this Drive to Survive series. And it really gives a behind the scenes look of the sport in a way that nobody had ever seen it before, apart from the people that were working in it. And even the people working in the sport knew their team, but not necessarily everyone else's team. And the drivers always wearing their helmet, very rarely presented in front of the public. This totally opened up their personalities. And the teams that first embraced Drive to Survive in that first series really gained a huge amount of exposure. Their sponsors absolutely loved it. And the first year, Mercedes and I think it was Mercedes and Ferrari both declined to take part, but they saw how much they missed out, and so they joined from the second season onwards. In 2020, we had Ross Braun here for this kind of gala evening with our collectors, and we had a special media lunch with him, and we were asking him, why is Formula One suddenly so popular? And he really attributed, even back in 2020, before the pandemic, the real driver of Formula One's incredible rise in terms of, media participation, in terms of sponsor participation, new races wanting to join, was the Drive to Survive series. And he really feels that was a huge player in making it such a big story in North America in particular. And, although Formula One has traditionally been a European-based series, for many, many years and had its heart in Europe, it always kind of came to North America, but didn't do particularly well. But after Drive to Survive, suddenly the U.S. Grand Prix was selling out. Next year, there's going to be 3 Formula One races in the United States. And, you include one in Canada and Montreal, one in Mexico, and then, the Brazilian Grand Prix. It's a big shift. And, the North and South America now plays, a total of 6 races out of a 23 race championship. That's a big focus for this space.
Wow.
And they're all sold out. I mean, next year, the first race in Las Vegas will take place. I can hardly imagine how crazy that's going to be because of, it's going to be a zoo. I mean, Miami was already a zoo this year. It was, how many celebrities and people, and getting into the paddock was incredibly difficult. It's, it also helps Canada. I mean, the rising, was it the rising tide floats all boats, or however that goes?
Yeah.
But Canada's also sold out. It sold out this year, and they're not struggling for ticket sales for next year as well.
So Jason, why do you think that they're wanting to come into the North American market in such a strong way? Like, they're obviously putting millions and millions and millions of dollars into this. Where is it that they see that the opportunity with F1? Is it just that it's relatively untouched?
So many of the sponsors of the sport are based in the United States.
Right.
Over 100 of the major team sponsors have their headquarters in the United States. And so that's one of the major drivers. But, there's so much more, dollars available. If Formula One can get the real attraction of the TV networks in the United States, that's where the big money is. And,
right.
You take a look at the TV deal that NFL has. I mean, billions of dollars annually. Compared to what Formula One currently gets out of the TV networks is paltry, even right. Today. That's where the real potential growth is financially for the sport. And I think that's why they're focused so heavily on the United States. And it's going to take a while. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's certainly growing. The TV audiences that we've seen for the couple of races that we've just had in North America are quite strong. So
right.
And growing year to year. So that's their focus, I'm sure. It's grown over the years. Formula One makes money in several different ways. TV is one. Charging new countries to host races is another one. And when I was working in when I left Renault F1, I was head of marketing, and then I did some work for the Russian telecoms company called Megaphone. They were trying and lobbying to get a Russian Grand Prix, and we were consulting with them on the contract for the Russian Grand Prix that eventually took place, and it happened in Sochi. But the contract there was huge, far bigger than any other contract that they had in Formula One at the time. It was probably by a magnitude of 2, bigger than any other contract that they had for any other market around the world. So it's important for Formula One to sell into those new markets, but you can't abandon the rest of Europe and the heart of Europe, which is, you want to keep the Monacos and the British Grand Prix, and I think some of the races and tracks that are older and don't have the facilities or government backing are going to struggle. Like the German Grand Prix, you'd think that would be a shoo-in considering all of the investment in the auto sector in Germany, but the track is in the middle of nowhere and they don't get government support. So it's struggled, and hence there right now isn't a German Grand Prix on the calendar.
Right. Now, going back to your Russian involvement with, is there an undercurrent of Russian driving? Like, I look at the North American market and we have NASCAR. You have a bit of a basis for why you would see that fundamentally going. It's just a bunch of turning left maybe, and it's a little different race, but fundamentally you can see where auto enthusiasts would get involved with that.
Well, I mean, this is before the war, of course. And
sure, absolutely.
This before the war, Putin had a very strong interest in promoting promoting Russia through sports, whether it be through soccer and I forget, was it the Euros it was held? I mean, they've held the Euro championships there. The Winter Olympics down in Sochi. It just there were companies that were involved in Formula One, and it brought big international attention, and that's why many countries get involved. You've got countries. You'd say, why does Azerbaijan have a Formula One race? Well, they want to put themselves on the map and be noticed internationally. Right. Middle East, many of those countries are doing it for the same reasons. And Qatar held its first Grand Prix. Saudi Arabia's got a Grand Prix. They want and covet the international attention that Formula One delivers around the world. And when you look at its audience and the fact that it runs from really March through until December, it's a year-round annual celebration that's got an audience in the billions. That you can get that with the FIFA World Cup, and you can get that with the Olympics, but they're every 4 years, whereas in Formula One it's every year. So it has its draw for countries to get noticed and get the perceived attraction of high technology and modern technology, which is synonymous with Formula One.
So with that being said, where do you see the need for an electric Formula One type racing program?
Well, I don't think Formula One will ever go fully electric. There has been a sport, Formula E is sanctioned by the FIA, and it's been running now. I think it's in its eighth season or so, which it's interesting racing, but in my mind, I'd call me an old school purist, but part of the spectacle of Formula One is the noise, it's right. The smell, it's the it's the whole glamour side of it, and for sure there will always be a significant portion of the engines which will be using electrical power. So the current modern engines in Formula One have used a mix of internal combustion engine as well as electric power, which provides sometimes I think it's up to currently I think it's about a third of the power of the engine is coming from the battery systems. And so each team is developing its own battery systems, which in the case of companies like Mercedes, they use that same technology in some of their road cars. You've got new brands like Audi coming into Formula One in 2026 to again take advantage of that modern technology transfer, and that kind of thing is going to be a part of it and has to be a part of it because that's where the whole auto sector is going. But I don't think it'll ever go completely electric. I think it'll miss some of that je ne sais quoi that the sport has if it does that.
Yeah, I have to agree with you.
Sorry,
for me, when I've gone to a few races, I've gone to a few in my life. It's the sound, like that raw grr of the sound, like you can almost feel it in your chest, and the smells and the speeds that I don't know if an electric car eventually maybe electric car will get to those speeds, but they're very heart wrenching, and also there's those big crashes with the flames, which electric cars probably won't provide, which isn't a nice thing. I know that's not a nice thing. So when I was a kid, I remember all of these races, Formula One, NASCAR, were linked to, they would talk about the engines, and then the cars that won sold cars outside of it. You know what I mean? Like It was kind of a marketing ploy because we build the best engine because we came first. And, there was that one big race that Netflix has promoted with Ford that all three cars made it across, Is there still a tie for that? Do you think people are watching that and going, "Oh, Honda is amazing because their engine is the best," or,
I mean, I think back to the time when one of the most successful Formula One cars in history was the McLaren Honda, and this was when I was 23, 24. But they were winning for years. Like it had 3, 4, 5 years of dominance, and that had their internal studies show that it did have a very positive impact on people's perception of the Honda brand. And so, it's not like you just win on Sunday and then you're going to sell more on Monday. That's the saying that I think you've probably heard.
Right.
And perhaps on a more mainstream type of vehicle, there's an argument to be said. I think NASCAR has always tried to, sell that whole concept. The car that you buy is the car you see racing on the track, which is total reality, total nonsense.
Yeah.
But it carries the same, model name, but it doesn't have anything to do with the car that's on the track. But there's, the audience in North America, in America in particular, is very different than a European audience. And I remember my first NASCAR race I went to was the Dover, Delaware 500. It was, I think it was the fall of 2003. I went over to Europe for the first time, I think in October. It was like September. I went to the Dover, Delaware race. And one thing that struck me was the audience people that were in the grandstand. There was a guy wearing his Rusty Wallace T-shirt and his Rusty Wallace ball cap and his Rusty Wallace seat cushion and his NASCAR, jogger pants. And I was like, this is crazy how much money. The drivers in NASCAR were making more money from their merchandise sales than they were
driving
by driving and being paid by the teams. You don't find that in Europe at all. That's you get people wearing caps and jerseys, but it's not the same fanaticism. So in North America, and in particular in the United States, that whole fanaticism that you find between fans and their drivers and their cars they drive actually does really line up. And so the brands that are competing there really do sell a lot more product. I mean, there were sponsors that were sponsoring some of the big NASCAR drivers, and those drivers, had such huge fan bases that would then go and shop at those stores that were sponsoring his car. So, I mean, it's a different mentality in different parts of the world, but in the U.S., where that really saying took off, there is a decent degree of truth in some of the brands.
Do you think you'll see that the advertising similar to NASCAR comes into the Formula One industry? I feel like right now, when I've watched races in the last little while or in the last number of years, there's obviously the marketing branding that goes along with it, but it's not every square inch. It does seem like it's still very much about the beauty and the elegance of the vehicle that they're driving. Whereas NASCAR, it just feels like every inch has a sticker. You think we're going to see something like that in a transition to a North American race structure?
Well, as more Americans are involved in the promotion of Formula One, that you probably will see more of that. I think there were some people in Formula One that were quite, not so keen on the whole idea. When Liberty took over Formula One, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was they did at the first U.S. Grand Prix, or the first race that they it was almost like calling out the drivers like they were some sort of football players or something, and it grated a lot of the Europeans that were working in the sports. And this is cheesy. This isn't what we do in Formula One. This is a bit crass, but I think it's inevitable that as more and more of the sport is reliant on the dollars that are coming out of the U.S., and there are more and more people with that kind of background coming into the sport and promoting it, you will gradually see that kind of commercialization, more and more get into the sport. And, I think that there's something to be said for the pizzazz that U.S. sports broadcasters bring to the game. That's why the biggest sport in the world is the NFL is as successful as it is. They really know how to sell it. And, it just may take a little bit of time to get everybody in the rest of the world, feeling that that's the right thing to do while they integrate it into the sport.
Absolutely. Well, so again, with the electric vehicles that are coming into the market now, companies like Ford, partnering with Rivian, bringing them online. Do you think that a lineup like that you're going to see where Rivian becomes like a line item, like for instance, like Lincoln became with Ford, or do you think that they're going to be almost separately marketed, separately branded, separately run businesses?
Yeah,
the electric.
Ford has actually divested itself from Rivian, but
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I think they've gone into many of these new, in particular, when they had autonomous vehicles starting out, they thought, a lot of the mainstream brands thought, okay, well, let's invest in these new startup autonomous vehicle makers, and we can learn from them and see what they do well. some of them were smaller companies that really had no business getting the valuations that they did.
Yeah.
But then when the big three, Ford, what's now called Stellantis and General Motors, decided to go all in on electric vehicles and really push on electric vehicles, their focus on autonomy, it's not gone, but they had to refocus entirely on electric. And so the companies that where the startup autonomous vehicles are generally being divested. And those big companies are saying, well, we need all of our resources focused on this electrification push. This is really where the future is going to be. And we can try and do the autonomous stuff ourselves in-house, but that's really where our focus is going to be. So it's hard to, I think a lot of the smaller startups, Tesla is an amazing success story, what they've managed to achieve. A lot of people, I remember back when I was still working in Formula One and Tesla was still a startup at the time. I was talking to engineers from some of our Nissan and Renault group, and some were saying, "Oh, it's going to die. This will never survive. They can never, pull together the resources. Look how hard it is for us as a company with 200,000 employees to do this." But they did, and others were saying, "No, they've got some amazing new ideas and ways of working, and they're a success story for sure." But not every one of them. In fact, I think there's probably a number of those small startups that, we'll see how long they go for, because the manufacturers are now, the mainstream manufacturers are all coming online with great products that have great range. It first started with Tesla was the only one that could go 500 miles on a single charge. Now that's common in the industry, and now there's a lot more competition out there for a lot more reasonable prices than what you could buy back 5 years ago.
Do you think Tesla is out of the woods yet? Like, would you be interested as an investor, as someone to say, like, Tesla, okay, they look like they are going to be a top 3, top 5 automaker for the next 30 years, or do you think that there is still a large headwind in their direction?
I would never put anything. I would never count out Elon Musk. He's proved everybody wrong many, many times. And so I think that the company probably has a very strong future. I'm not a gambler on the stock market, so I wouldn't want to tell you what the valuation is.
Right.
But the vehicle has a very strong following, and people that love Teslas, you just love them regardless of what other people might point to and say, well, it doesn't do this as well or it doesn't do that as well.
Right.
It doesn't matter for many of those folks, and I've got several friends who own Teslas, and they just think that he's a visionary and love the product. For the supercharging system which they have established across the world is really such a huge plus for that brand that no other brand has that kind of network that's really so easily accessible and can charge their cars so fast that he really was way ahead of the curve on that front.
So Jason, okay, with touching base with what we're talking about with Elon and the automotive sector, what does a nationalizing world where people are moving away from global supply chains, what is that going to do for an electric automobile market for the years to come? If you're having problems being able to get raw commodities, we're looking at this through the war in the Ukraine, supply chains are breaking down. How is that going to hinder, or is it an opportunity potentially for a new automobile sector to be able to thrive through this?
It's so hard. I mean, the auto sector is so globally interconnected, and I think there's great opportunities here in Canada because everyone's nearshoring things now because of the challenges that they faced over the last 2 years. Right. How can you get more of your components closer to where you're actually building and selling your products? And hopefully, as it relates to electric vehicles, Canada and Ontario in particular is strongly placed with a lot of resources in our province that can help develop those products and supply the industry of that which it needs. Now, many people are questioning: is there enough, lithium in the world to actually build all these batteries? Is there enough cobalt? And what's the economic, and in particular, what's the environmental cost of mining all of these materials? And that's something that I don't think anybody really knows the answer to just yet. But for the world's, there seems to be a desire for manufacturers and not just car manufacturers, but everybody, that they see the risks of investing in, non-stable countries and think, what, maybe we ought to just, it may cost a little bit more, but maybe we should be investing with friendly countries and, making it a little more reliable and bring as much of the production home as we can. But there's so many thousands of components involved in putting a car on the road. Even if you tried and started today trying to bring back all of the technology into North America, you'd be years and years before you could do that, because of all the different parts that are coming from all over the world to make these cars.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Jason, I think you've been amazing. I just want to, reiterate. So it's the Canadian International Auto Show. I have the website up there, the www.autoshow.ca. I've been on it a couple of times. In fact, I used there's a movie from, I think, before COVID, and it's like this short. I think it's a trailer, and I used that in some of our media before this event. Is that where I would go to buy tickets?
Yeah, we're actually launching ticket sales next Friday, and that'll be the first time the tickets are available to people that had previously registered with the show. Are going to be getting a special rate first offer for the first 5 days, but we'll be selling tickets right up to and throughout the show. It's going to be a great show this year. I think we're going to have big numbers coming through, and I think that there's so much enthusiasm for people to get back and see one another again and really get involved in this, social. I wouldn't call it a social experiment. It's not. It's a social thing that they've used to doing over the years, and they haven't been able to do it. So it's going to be great to get everyone back together again. We're looking forward to it.
Can we buy tickets when we show up at the door as well?
You can show up at the door and buy tickets as well, but we would encourage you to. It depends if you're coming with families. Family Day weekend's a big one for sure. That's when everybody wants to come. Come early or come late if you want to. Have the easiest walk through the show. We have a healthy audience, and it's fun whenever you come. But I think you're better off being earlier than later,
because it gets quite busy, hard to move around a little bit because there's so many people.
During the week is also great. I mean, we find a lot of people coming in that are working downtown, and they'll finish work and come in the evening, which is probably the most relaxed time to come in and do the show.
Is there parking right beside it? Better to
There's parking all over downtown, and at the convention center, you've got parking. 20 different options you'll find on our website when tickets go live.
Perfect.
That's amazing. Well, Jason, I know you're a super busy guy. You're running a whole show over there. I do appreciate you taking the time on a word from your father that these two crazy guys who have a podcast want to talk to you. And I do appreciate you coming on. Obviously, your stuff. Wow. You have a wide breadth of knowledge about all things cars that you've really blown my mind here. I've learned a lot tonight, and I do appreciate you coming on. Now, we do this ending where if you watched your father, which at the end we all have sign-offs. Pat has a sign-off. I have a sign-off. We do a little goodbye, and then we say our sign-off, and then we pass it on. So I'll do mine first, and then Pat will do his, and then it'll be up to you. And then you come up with like a phrase, a saying, something that you just want to tell everyone. It can be about living life. It can be just about, I don't know, your favorite car. It really doesn't matter. It's whatever thrills you. Okay. So profiteers out there, I hope you enjoy this. His father Ross was just amazing, knowledgeable in his own right. And Jason, you are no different. Your storytelling is epic, much like your father's. And I really enjoyed our conversation today and all the stuff we learned about Formula One and electric cars on a whole other level that I think will help the Soaring Prophets out there. And I think they should get out and see this Canadian International Auto Show. I've been to a few shows at the center there, and it's always a good time. All of the shows are wonderful. Profiteers out there, as always, let's get back out. Let's start getting our families out, enjoying things again. I think it's time that we start embracing each other and just getting out there and enjoying public things. And this one is going to be one of the epic ones we should get to. Let's heal our minds, bodies, and souls together.
Jason, again, thank you so much. Your father was fantastic, and you were a chip off the old block, so I appreciate that. I very much look forward to seeing you in February. I'll be bringing my daughter down. She's been listening here beside me. Thank you for putting up with us through our technical difficulties as well this evening. Jason, look forward to meeting you. Hopefully we can get there and see you. So profiteers out there, let's make some money together. And Jason, this is where we stick you with the little saying at the end.
Well, Patrick, James, thanks again. I appreciate the chance to join you. And I see why my dad enjoyed the conversation so much. So I look forward to welcoming you guys down to the show. We'll put your foot on the gas and get down to the auto show. So look forward to seeing you in a couple months in February. Take care.
Sounds great.